Have you ever been in a situation where you want to make something disappear? I'm John Quay, and that's a situation I'm very familiar with. Last summer, I panel bonded fiberglass wide-body fenders to my 1994 E320 W124. They are now one with the car, and now it looks ridiculous. I'll be using all the knowledge that I've absorbed over the past few years to make all of my modifications look factory. To make them look all original, never painted. Now it's time to make them disappear with bodywork and a little magic. Welcome to the Mind, and welcome to Club Quay. Before any bodywork can happen, there was a lot of work that had to be done. With the mindset I've acquired from these years working on high-end cars, countless hours were spent perfecting areas that would never be seen. It's what makes the difference between something of high quality or something that's cheap and quite embarrassing. And is questionably the most important work done on any wide-body install, but I'll get to that in the next video, the next chapter. If you stick around, I'll show you a couple of my tricks. In the process of installing these fiberglass 500E fenders from classic Euro parts, I intentionally went overboard with the panel bond to create a larger contact surface area. I wasn't sure how much more fiberglass I would have to trim for the bodywork. I also didn't know how long it would be until I got to work on the car again. So to prevent any possible surface rust, I brushed the excess panel bond over any bare metal. That being said, I've made a mess of it, and now I have to remove most of it. Using my trusty grinder, paired with a Scotch-Brite disc, I began the removal process. The Scotch-Brite was abrasive enough to grind away the panel bond, but not strong enough to grind any metal away. The only problem was, they didn't last long, so I switched to a more durable, more abrasive, ceramic strip disc. Definitely the ideal choice. And it's ideal to remove most of the paint. Although you don't have to, applying body filler directly to the substrate is the way to go. With that out of the way, I switched to 60 grit, tapering the edges of the fiberglass to create a transition for the bodywork, along with grinding down the panel bond that filled the mounting holes. The numbering system of sandpaper grit is measured by the size of the abrasive material on the paper. The lower the number, the more coarse, and the higher the number, the finer the abrasive. But in these early stages, I'll be using the more abrasive sandpaper. Every step is a transition from the last, and something I've learned the hard way. About a decade ago, I was adventurous enough to do a seamless wide-body install on my 1999 BMW E36 M3, without a clue in the world how to properly play this game. In many areas, I sanded the body filler right down to those hard edges, which didn't appear until a few years later, along with several other imperfections that I'll refer to. We all start somewhere. This time around, I even feathered the edge inside the edge, bringing the fiberglass down to the panel bond. As inconvenient as this looks, I wanted to create as many sanding scratches as possible for the body filler to bite onto. Mechanical adhesion. Next up was to sand down the white gel coat with an orbital DA, an 80 grit sandpaper. In the last video, I spray bombed these body lines as a guide coat, sanding the paint off the body line to reveal one of my biggest concerns. The body lines on these front fenders have given up. They're not even close. They can be fixed, but it won't be easy. It'll require some of that magic. With all the paint removed and the gel coat imperfections sorted out, it was the first of many cleaning sessions. I have a hard time functioning properly when things are a mess. But more importantly, the upcoming chemical products are the same way. Blowing the panels off and using a silicone degreaser will be on repeat. Along with mechanical adhesion, a clean surface is crucial for chemical adhesion. You ever think how crazy it is the way paint sticks to a car? Products like silicone degreaser bring the dirt and oils to the surface. You always gotta wipe the panel dry and never let it air dry. Any areas left to air dry will leave dirt residue marks, which is no good. Aside from those body lines, my next biggest concern was shaping the bodywork from the fiberglass to the front edge of the front corners, and the rear of the fiberglass to the front doors. They have to transition just right or it won't look factory. Which is why I cut these fenders the way I did. The material I'll be using for this stage of bodywork is not easy to sand, so I masked out the area to create less work for myself later. I'll be using a filler compound formulated from Kevlar and fiberglass strands, which makes it much stronger than conventional body filler, less likely to crack. Fibertech from Evercoat. I'm not one to dive into the instruction manual of anything, but when it comes to chemistry-related products, it's a must. Countless hours are spent in the lab developing these products. As much as I like to explore the trial and error, I'll leave that to the chemists. Not following the technical data sheet would just be a waste of time and money. It's a two-part product, the purple Fibertech itself, and the blue hardener, which is only 2% of the mix ratio by weight. Using a plastic spreader, the best way to mix is to scoop the material and fold it repeatedly. It can get tricky mixing too much at once. It's too much push. Once it's all the same color, I like to firmly spread it across the sheet to make sure there's no trapped air. Applying it to the panel is simple, but somehow I always manage to get lost in the sauce. I didn't think of a game plan before I got into it. It's best to apply a decent amount to one area, then firmly spreading that material out, moving to the next area, and repeat. I was all over the place. Luckily, this stuff takes a while before it begins to set. According to the TDS, about 5 to 6 minutes. So I had some time to sort out my mess. As I've said, this stuff is very hard to sand. It's like sanding concrete, so you need to spread it out as smooth as possible. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes until it's ready to sand. I tend to get impatient, so I kept myself busy, prepping the rears the same way I did with the fronts. And of course, I had to stop because I haven't taken out the taillights yet. Something I've been procrastinating, just because I like looking at them on the car. With the taillights out, I was back to the prep work. Which didn't last long before I felt the need to touch the front fenders, which still felt tacky. I knew they would, but I had to get it out of my system. Just an excuse to step away for a second. This repetitive work can drive anyone crazy. This area is going to be tricky to disappear. The edge sticks out much further than I'd like. Other than that, the rears have plenty of room to work with. Prep work is always the most time consuming, so my mind tends to wander away from time to time. Far, far away. I snap back once something new comes into play. Like this damage on the left quarter panel that I forgot all about. Part of the reason I felt it was acceptable to cut up this car. And if you were curious what's up with the stripes, it helps me find any imperfections. All you have to do is watch the reflections. Know what I mean? I used a dolly and hammer to flatten the damage out. Even though it's irrelevant with this job, it's always best to get the metal correct before any filler. Although I will be using a lot, the less material you use, the better. Good habits. With the prep work finally done on the rears, it's Fibertech time. After that sloppy situation on the fronts, I had a game plan this time around, and things went much smoother. It's definitely a strange substance to work with. It's thick, but it also feels thin. You have to apply it with pressure, which makes it harder to build. Once I had the entire area spread out, I would pass over again, but much lighter. The fiber strands cause it to pull and move itself with each pass. So it's ideal for the last few passes to be all one motion, leaving it up to chemistry to do its thing. And over 20 minutes passing by since the Fibertech was applied to the fronts, it was the beginning of the sculpting process. I used 80 grit on the DA to knock down most of the high points. I don't like to shape the bodywork with the DA, but it's useful in the beginning to speed things up. There are other tools and methods that can be used to speed up the process. A surf-formed plane, also known as a rasp or cheese grater, which shaves the body filler at ease. However, it creates deep scratches. In most situations, there's always a trade-off to speed up a process. Using the more abrasive 40 grit sandpaper is another option, but again, that leaves scratches that are too aggressive. Incorrectly removing deep sanding scratches will show up in time. You have to use finer sandpaper grits to remove them, never jumping over 100 on the sandpaper number system. I always avoid filling scratches with any products. Most of these chemical products shrink when fully cured, revealing those sanding scratches. So I take the time-consuming route, never using anything more abrasive than 80 grit. If you don't want a problem, don't introduce it. Remember that. Using a long sanding block and 80 grit, I began shaping the panel. There is an unspoken tool of the trade that is required: patience. Similar to magic, it is a mysterious supernatural force, and acquiring it may forever be a mystery to some. I believe the amount of patience you have is determined by how bad you want something. Every once in a while, I have to ask myself that question to keep my patience in check. Which leads me to think about my entire life a few more times. I'm still learning from my mistakes. Let's shed some light on my M3 as a reminder. A good portion of time later, the surface on all four corners were finally blocked down. Didn't feel great. Several issues, but think of this as a rough draft. There was a rough transition from fiberglass to the door, as expected. The front corners had the same issue, also expected. Despite all the issues I had in the rears in the last video, they felt pretty decent right off the bat, a pleasant surprise. However, I managed to find an issue, the story of my life. The portion of the arch transitioning out from the rear doors was a red flag. The transition was way too aggressive. The low spots are all the areas that appear unsanded. The high spots, you can see the edges of the fiberglass very clear. It's tempting to not make a big deal out of it, but making a big deal out of these things is the connection to chasing perfection. They say the mind of a perfectionist is always in pain. Good from afar, but far from good. So I grinded down every high spot, far enough to fill with Fibertech, but never grinding down all the way through. This is when the panel bond overload makes sense. I knew I had to remove the fiberglass, I just didn't know how much. Speaking of which, I used the grinder to taper this section even further. In most cases, there will be pinholes in the filler, and small air pockets depending on how well you mixed and applied. It's important to blow all the dust out, and open up any air pockets. In time, these will bubble out. It happened to my M3, that's how I know. Before applying more filler, all the unsanded low spots need sanded. I use the red scuff pad, which is easier to sand in tight crevices. And once again, more repetitive cleaning. With the filler being so porous, it's important the solvent degreaser is completely dry before the next round of filler. Any solvents trapped with nowhere to escape will eventually find a way out, resulting in another delayed surface imperfection, the unwanted surface encounter. I could have switched to regular body filler at this point, would have made my life way easier. But remember, I'm not here to take any shortcuts. So I forced more of that purple concrete into the panels. All the pinholes, the low spots I've created, along with the existing low spots. And courageously ventured on to cover the fiberglass entirely. I can at least have a peace of mind knowing this bodywork will not crack. Let's just hope I don't crack with all the sanding that I'll have to do. You can see how that body line disappears above the arch. I'll need to build up that area with filler, then sculpt out the line. But I think I'm done with this Kevlar infused material. I need to step away for a hot minute. Some time to reflect. Back to work. No push-ups necessary. Many moments later, I blocked the rest of the Fibertech. It's always best to feather out the block scratches with a DA. The orbital sanding motion sort of blends the scratches together. This concern still needs taken care of, but I'll deal with that in the next phase of the process. It's interesting how transparent the Fibertech is. The darker sections revealing what areas needed more material, while some areas appear to have no material at all. But there was just enough where it wouldn't be an issue, as long as there was no drastic transitions between substrates. With the strong foundation sculpted in, it's time to work on the final draft. To keep the chemistry within the same ecosystem, I'll be using another product from Evercoat. Everyone in the business will have their own opinion on just about everything, but Evercoat products are known for their high quality. A product used at high-end body shops, like the smooth operators at J&B Bodyworks. Rage Optex Premium Filler. It's known for a durable finish, one that eliminates pinholes. And for the sake of today's video, the color changes from a pink to green when it's ready to sand. How wonderful. In chemistry terms, body filler is a polyester resin. According to the recipe, it also has a 2-part mix ratio, with only 2% of the hardener, and the same mixing procedure. But this feels much thicker, which makes it easier to build. It's got the same type of consistency as the fancy icing you would find on a cake. It's time to cook. Something all original. Overthinking everything all at once, I was all over the place, without a game plan. After I got that out of my system, it was another case of divide and conquer. But really, it's all on the wrist. Now we're cooking. Even though most of this icing will be removed, skimming the entire panel is best for the sculpting. Some may say my application techniques are sloppy. Let's call it creative. And let's not forget, tape is my favorite. I pass my finger along the edges to save myself some work. In about 20 minutes time, the lavender icing will turn to mint. To keep myself busy, I remove the door handles. Originally, I had intentions to stay off the doors, but I've come this far, so I might as well paint the entire car. The body lines of the W124 came to life with the art of clay modeling. With clay, designers could sculpt their vision at ease, using various tools that cut through the clay like butter. The easier it is to shape, the easier it is to bring the vision to life. Unlike clay, the polyester resin of body filler is meant to last. Once it's fully cured, it essentially becomes a hard plastic. It's not as strong as the Kevlar infused Fibertech, but it will be much easier to shape. In a way, bodywork is similar to the process which sculptures are created, with the exception that those shapes come straight from the creator's mind, and bodywork is based on replicating shapes. Replicating is never as cool. Sculptors start with aggressive tools to knock down the bulk of the material, using various shapes and sizes depending on what contours need sculpted, working their way to much finer, less abrasive tools to finalize their work, all done by hand. Maybe I should have used a chisel for that Fibertech. These are the tools that I'll be using to sculpt the panels. Sanding blocks, various shapes and sizes, made by Durablock. They say don't judge a book by its cover. Scary. Using the large flat blocks to create an even flat surface, of course. I like to sand across the area at an angle, then sand over the same area at an opposite angle. Sanding straight across will create a groove. Think of it like a razor blade going across a surface. And I like to feather the crosshatch marks by sanding in an orbital fashion, which isn't necessary on a surface that's completely flat. Although a boxy car may appear to have flat surfaces, you will rarely find a surface that is perfectly flat. Orbital fashion. The skinny block used for tighter sections, they also flex a bit, which is useful around the fender arches. And the round block to sculpt in the bends. Simple tools and common sense. But one of the most important tools is your hands, the feel. Looking at a panel that has no reflection can be very deceiving. I often find myself closing my eyes and seeing with my hands. and it always helps to have another set of eyes. How wonderful. Despite all that sanding elegance, the front body lines are still way off. Once again, I'll need to apply more filler to build this area up, along with any remaining low spots. How ridiculous. Repetition is the name of this game. So simple, yet so complicated. To stay patient and motivated to continue on. It's so tempting to take shortcuts, but remember, it has to be done in layers, in a maximum of 6 millimeters. How bad do I want this car done? How bad do I want to drive it again? Trust the patience. Still easier than making these videos. It genuinely has been a while since my last video, but I've been very busy. I feel like I'm always fighting time. Aside from my computer constantly giving up on me, time stops for no one. And there are certain moments in time that I won't let pass me by. The coolest little guy in the world. My greatest collaboration. Hey Stoney, forget about it. But really, my setup can't handle these videos. Like, it's complicated, but when you smash that like button, it does a lot for me. And I can keep making more videos for you guys because I know you love my content. I can't tell you that I love doing bodywork. The payout will never compare to painting. But I'm still doing everything that I can to navigate through this new life of mine. Several years of my life were spent working on high-end cars. In this business, I haven't felt a better feeling than pulling off a full paint job on something like a Bugatti Veyron. Of everything from a Bugatti to a Bugatti. Flipping the script to do bodywork on the everyday car, there's a shock to that, and it's hard to explain. Something's never been done before with this one. I need to improve my efficiency, creating less work for myself. Pressing firmly into the panel helps eliminate pinholes and air pockets, but pressing too hard limits how much material is built up. Pressing too light will build material, but I always end up with air pockets this way. Using different types of spreaders can help with different situations. A softer spreader is good for building material. A stiffer spreader is good for filling in holes and small low spots. Still working on my finesse with spreading, but that comes with time. Realistically, I'd never use this much polyester at work, but this project has legitimately helped me improve my skill set. The silver lining. Regardless of my techniques, as long as you follow the TDS, the outcome will finesse. To shape the body line, I start with the easiest surface, above the line. I then work my way up from the bottom, which got me to realize why this area is so difficult. The distance from the body line to the arch flaring out is super tight, and to replicate the line, you need the block to lay completely flat, which the arch interferes with. Sanding straight across would cut a groove into the arch. I tried basically everything with what I had, even some unconventional moves. With no real success, but I was getting somewhere, navigating through. Soaking the panels in a slow-drying silicone degreaser is another trick to see the bodywork, temporarily giving the surface a gloss finish. You can see the reflections. Using my good friend tape to help out with my directions, I mask out the body line along the entire side of the car. With my sights in line with the body line, I mask out the fender. Once the arch comes into play, the line makes the slightest curve, down towards the indicator lamps. With the line correct, I mark it with pencil. Sanding above the line will bring it down. Sanding below the line will bring it up and in. But I still had the issue of the arch getting in the way. Still not great. Still not ideal. More filler, repetition. Once again, masking the body line. But with thicker tape, leaving it in place this time. And a new block came to the party, made by 3M. The long teardrop shape should solve my problems. Well, this one at least. Without a hard angle at the bottom, I had more freedom to cut more or less straight across, without ruining the arch contour. Finally. And next on the list for biggest concerns, the transition from the rear doors to the car's new rear curves. I penciled in where the edge should be. I mark it with pencil. Turns out the teardrop block was also great for this scenario. Removing material up to the line while still maintaining the nice curves. Followed by sanding inside the quarter jam by hand. The doors will be removed and I'll be painting all the jams when that time comes. Feeling good? Looking good. With the sculpting now complete, there's a few more important steps before primer. The final stretch. I can't believe it. Regardless what product you use, there's a good chance there will always be pinholes. They specifically make a more fluid polyester for this, but I prefer to use the same filler, and using the razor edge for persuasion. Once all the pinholes have been filled and sanded, all of the 80 grit sanding scratches need removed, and to ensure I don't miss anything, I'll be using dry guide coat from 3M, a powder that you apply to the surface, like chalk. Rubbing the guide coat into the entire panel, forcing the powder into all the scratches that could easily be overlooked. You gotta get into it. And to double check my work, using 180 grit, I sanded by hand with a block again, revealing everything from deep scratches to pinholes and low spots in the bodywork. Think of it as tracing, but the negative, removing the lines rather than creating them. Once the surface is completely free of imperfections, the negative tracing is complete. And there was one last thing I almost forgot about, but really got under my skin. At some point in this car's life, the rear end had a cheap repair done, so cheap that a sticker was painted over. They even managed to put a run in the clear. How embarrassing. I've been waiting a very long time to do that. Sadly, it was time for the quirky mismatched side mirrors to come off. I had paintless dent removal done on the car right after I bought it. There was one area that was beyond PDR work. It needed repaired. With the vanishing tricks revealed, it's time to prep for primer. The climax of this magic. Feathering out the 180 grit block scratches using 180 on the DA, followed by 220, and finishing in 320. Just gotta be careful. The more you sand, the more the possibility of more pinholes making an appearance. Lastly, using the scuff pad to attack all the areas the sandpaper can't. It's safe to say I've done a lot of sanding on this car, and it's safe to say I hate removing plastic clips. But I've found patience. You just have to... There was only one thing left to do. Tough guy. So much patience and motivation spent. In the shadows of this dark, cold garage, something beautiful began to emerge. Watch the shadows. It's important to take a moment to admire the work, the fuel to keep going, the motivation. Or it can be the fuel to end a project if you don't like what you see. I like what I see. Moving on. Cleaning up to reset. It goes a long way for me. For me, I love it. Masking a car for primer can be a simple job, or a complex job. As a painter, I needed a perfect mask job, a present wrapped real good. When you understand how much time and money goes into this craft, you should set high standards with every step of the way, to ensure you come out on top. If you don't want an issue, don't introduce it. Anything that could ruin a paint job will give any painter OCD, even a poor mask job, which is why I prefer to do it myself. Always trust the person to take full responsibility. Masking for primer isn't on the same level. It's not the final product. But trust me, good habits go a long way. Be clever on where the primer needs to be and where it should feather out. And the primer I'll be using isn't easy to sand, so this is important. The other reoccurring theme, a never-ending dream. Foam tape in the panel gaps, areas back taped and pulled just right off the edge. And when it comes to plastic or masking paper, pulling the paper or plastic tight enough so it doesn't fly around when spraying. Using a fresh blade that glides across the plastic so effortlessly, there's never enough force applied to cut through the tape underneath. Nice clean mask lines that never come undone as I pass a tack rag along the panel. These are a few of the things I look for before spraying. This is the standard. I miss doing this. How strange. And finally, using folded tape to create a soft paint line. To achieve that feather. How clever. Check the lines in the reflection. See the waves? This primer will help sort that out. And one more clean to finesse the OCD. I wish I was at the stage of painting. Sometimes it's nice to pretend. I once said, every step is the most important step. Primer is the last step to take all of this work to paint. The bridge to the gap. I feel like each of these chemicals have a unique personality, and based on those personalities, only some of them can be friends. But everyone seems to be friends with primer. But primer is never the one to shine. Funny, isn't it? The primer I'll be using is a polyester primer from Evercoat. Super build 4:1, and everyone gets along with this guy. It's basically a sprayable body filler you can paint directly to, using a fast catalyst for the colder temps of this garage, and I'll be spraying with a 3M PPS gun. It's got disposable tips. The nozzle, air cap, and funnel are all one piece. It's useful for tough guys like this primer if you forget to clean the gun. You just throw the tip away. The very clever name, Super Build 4:1, referring to the mix ratio, 4 parts primer, 1 part catalyst. It's quite alarming how difficult it is to mix by hand. It's like mixing water into clay. I've never sprayed this before. I went into it pretending as if it would be the same as spraying regular primer. I spray the first edge. Well, that came out weird. And spray the entire panel, top to bottom, following the wet edge. As ridiculous as it may sound, I prefer going into this as if I know nothing. Once I experience everything incorrect firsthand, the only thing left in mind is how can I make that better. Chasing perfection. It's like a game. If I never get to experience what's incorrect, the only thought I have is to not make a mistake, which is a dead-end thought. As I worked my way down, it was spraying too dry. The goal is always to lay down a nice even surface. The smoother the better. This was far from that. So I started playing around with my air pressure, even shaking it to reassure myself that it's mixed properly. Aimlessly, I sprayed over the dry areas, still navigating the incorrect. I began to spray with a very narrow fan pattern, concentrating the material closer together, creating a wetter, smoother pass. But with each pass only covering about an inch, it took way longer, using more air, which my arm and air compressor couldn't keep up with. It looked better, but not ideal. I kept going with the tight fan pattern, but it was getting crazy. I felt like a week went by, spraying one door. Know what I mean? After each panel, I had to wait for my air compressor to fill back up. The more I had to wait, the drier the previous panels got, creating dry overspray each time I started back up. On the last panel, I decided to go back to my usual air pressure of 22 psi, a wider fan pattern, spraying much closer, dividing the panel up into thirds. It was problem solving in real time. A new game plan unlocked. It looked much better, closer to the usual primer finish, the orange peel. The key to any smooth paint job is to follow the wet edge. Think of it as dipping an object into paint. The closer you get to that, the closer to perfection. And again, this is not as important with primer. It will be sanded anyway, but the smoother the surface, the easier it is to sand. If you're learning to paint, spraying primer is your ticket to learn. It was for me back when I worked at a factory. I sprayed 3 coats. The build-up from 2 coats would have been enough, but the 3rd coat was just for good luck. And the day after... boom, 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 boom. This was a story of how I made wide-body panels disappear on my Mercedes Benz, using the magic of patience. Or was it a story of how I navigate through life? Either way, I had to stick my finger in the primer for old time's sake. You see it? There's still a long way to go. This primer will need blocked, just like the body filler. More repetitive combat. This moment in time deserves a slight celebration. I don't belong here. I want a perfect body. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching.